Okay, so I think I'm ready.
Yeah, I mean, I have no notes. I have the book here, and that's all I
Okay.
got.
Okay.
And I was
Well, then
using, I've been,
we'll talk about my notes. This is just what I always wanted this podcast to be,
uh-huh,
is talking about what I care about.
there you go.
How do you do? We're about to unfold the story of Frankenstein.
A tale that sent my blood into icy creeps. A monster created from cadavers out of rifled graves.
My purpose was to write a moral lesson of the punishment that befell a mortal man who dared to emulate God. Would you like to hear what happened after that?
Well, we've warned you.
You've been warned. Welcome back to Frankenstein Minute, the podcast that ordinarily dissects the Universal Frankenstein film series minute by minute. But this week, for this episode, we're doing something a little different. I'm Bill Evenson.
That's the different thing that we're doing. And I'm Thom Lang, and we are doing commentary on the novel Frankenstein or the Modern Prometheus, written by Mary Wollstonecraft Godwin Shelley.
I like the way you did that because it's been written by her a couple of times.
It
the
has.
first time she wrote it, her name was Mary Wollstonecraft Godwin.
Godwin, yes.
And
then it was, yeah.
The person who wrote what we're going to talk about today was not named Godwin.
No, she was named Shelley.
Yeah, she, in fact, she went by MWS. There's still some...
Yeah, there's like documents that are signed that way, yeah.
Well, that's what's in the book. She doesn't even say her name in the... It says MWS at the end of the introduction.
End of the introduction, yeah. But I've seen like handwritten things too, where that's how she would sign stuff.
Sure, that makes sense. Huh.
I mean, I do that. I sign things TBL all the time.
Is that true?
Yeah, artwork and things. Yeah, that's how I sign it.
Oh man, that's funny. I look over.
There it is.
Right there it is. I have a signed Lang right next to me.
There you go.
It says TBL. Okay, so today seeing as our podcast is built upon dissecting things in little bite-sized chunks, today what we hope to talk about is the introduction, because well, that's the version we're doing. We're doing the 1831 edition of Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. And the reason we're doing this is because I finally read the damn thing.
After what? This has been 3 years now?
Well, it's been 50 years that I didn't read
it. I'll give you that, but 3 years since we started this that you haven't read it.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. It's to my great shame. I think that one of the things it will prove is that our podcast is a failure on my part, because there's a lot to say about it that, we'll talk about the movies. Imagine that the movie actually has stuff that was in the book.
Stuff that was actually from the book, and all the way up to even Young Frankenstein has direct quotes from the book.
Well, spoilers. We're going to get to that. I've got the notes from this, and that comes later in the introduction. There's a very specific quote.
Yes,
and we'll get to that, I guess. Do you want to do this chronologically or just a free-form discussion? Either way,
through the introduction chronologically, or
because my notes are chronologically through the introduction.
That's fine then. You take the reins, because as I said, I'm back in high school and I haven't done my homework. I have read it. I have read it. I don't know how many times, but I did read it the other night too. So
okay, good.
I have prepared at least that far.
So here's what's embarrassing once again. Now that you say that, I can't believe I'm going to admit this right off the top. I actually haven't read it. And what I mean by that is I didn't realize until just a couple of days ago that I did read the 1818 edition, and I haven't read the 1831. Okay. So, and that's what we decided to do against our better judgment, right? You prefer the 1818.
I do, because it's more concise. It shows where she was at in her life when it was written. they were iconoclasts. They were flaunting all of the social mores of the era, and a lot of that comes through in the novel. By 1831, she had been a widow for 8 years, was a mother, and was a fairly well-respected author, and something of a celebrity. So it's much more conservative. It is more fleshed out, but I think I like the 1818 one because it's a little naughtier.
So it's like in 8 years when I pass away and you go back and edit all of our podcasts and make them a little nicer.
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly what'll
So
happen.
I got to ask, have you read the 1816 version?
That's the facsimile
Yeah,
of
this
with her handwriting, or
well, I have that too. I actually got that from the library. If you want to buy that, that's going to cost you a pretty penny.
it's pretty.
But I checked it out
pricey.
from the library so I could see it. It's what you'd expect. The Frankenstein notebooks, I think.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
what it's called. But
I've got a few other books that reproduce a number of pages from it.
yeah.
So.
But this one, it doesn't do that, or maybe it does. No, it doesn't do that.
What is
But what
that
it does do is it presents the novel in two different versions. It's got a version that has the 1818 text, essentially, what exists of it from the notebooks, with Percy Shelley's
Right, his
additions in
annotations.
italics.
Right. Okay.
And then it has a version that's just what Mary wrote, based on this scholar's work.
Okay. See, I just read about that in this book here, the new annotated Frankenstein by Max Klinger. No, it's somebody Klinger. Let me look here.
Hey, do you ever see those ads on
Leslie
TV?
Leslie Klinger. Yeah. Where
Can you imagine they put him in a MASH
fatigues.
uniform? They put him in fatigues. Like, come on, guys. Really?
They didn't. At least they didn't put him in a dress.
That's what I'm saying. He should be in a dress.
Oh, yeah, you'd like to see an 80-year-old man wearing a dress.
I mean, save that clip. Yes, of course. I always want to see an 80-year-old man in a dress.
All right.
If there's ever any question, when I turn 80, use this clip.
See, here's where this podcast gets expensive. Now, what is the exact title of that book that you're referring to? Because I'm going to order it right now.
It's called The Original Frankenstein.
Okay.
And you are going to order it right now because
it's not
prohibitively expensive. It's even brand new. It's $15.
Oh, $15. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That'll be here on Tuesday. So perfect.
Excellent. So then when I looked at it, what's funny is when you skip ahead to I thought I'll just skip ahead to the Mary part and just see how she opens up.
Mm-hmm.
And then it just starts in the middle of a sentence because that's what exists.
Yeah.
So, don't get your hopes up that you're going to.
Oh, no. I know exactly what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyways, yeah, I think that's important to, as we progress through this, to at least attempt to understand what additions or whatever notes Percy made.
Well, and that, and also the differences between the two.
Oh, absolutely. Between the 1818 and the 1831.
1818, it starts right away, doesn't it? With Victor, it was a dark night in November when I blah blah blah, doesn't it?
Not at all. In fact, there's a preface.
It still has the Captain Walton, and
it has the Captain Walton, and before that, even there's a preface that was written.
Okay. Oh, so that was written. The preface for that one, was written by Percy.
That's one of the things that's in this introduction.
Okay.
To the 1831 edition. And now we're really not going in chronological order, but later I had notes on it. I think what's really the big takeaway is that there has been research done, to the point of this guy recognizing the difference in handwriting,
right,
to show what Mary wrote and what she didn't write, and what, was an addition by Percy. And this is important to me because on Facebook recently, on some Facebook group, not our Facebook group where the discussions are generally a little more erudite. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I think, the people there that are part of the Frankenstein Minute Army generally know what they're talking about. Whereas a lot of other groups, I've just started to ignore because I just get frustrated.
Yeah. The lesser groups. A guy went off and started posting numerous posts about how Mary couldn't have written this. And I'd say he's just a troll. So I didn't spend much time on it.
Yeah.
But I think it's important because now I'm going to go off the rails, but I did visit Auschwitz. And one of the things I found interesting was that the tour guide spent so much time trying to prove to us that this was a real thing that happened. It made me really uncomfortable. It was really sad.
It's
right?
really too bad that has to be the case. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's what I think is also sad, is that we are going to talk about a tremendous book that has had wide-ranging import. This podcast wouldn't exist without it.
Yeah, obviously we wouldn't be talking about it.
which is not of much import, but
it had been yeah. I mean, it's a book that's never, since 1831, has never been out of print.
Right.
And
it was written.
It is a literary classic, like it or not, and it was written by a 18-year-old girl. So deal with it.
Yeah, and people have a hard time dealing with that, and I
don't understand why.
I think I do understand why.
Well,
sadly.
okay, I guess I do. Yeah,
and I think that's what's great about someone bothering to do the research is to get to the bottom of that. Why not prove it? Why not prove that she did in any way we can? And there's plenty of good reason just on the surface to believe that she was capable of this. She wrote other things.
She wrote other books.
Yeah. She had a remarkable upbringing. Her parents were both, well, now I'm getting ahead of myself in my notes again.
Well, okay.
All right, let's go back to my notes.
Stop that thought. Go back
stop
to your
that
notes.
thought. Well, it's actually, that's pretty early on when she says that. So let me just go back to my notes. The only thing I wanted to say is the first 6 words of the introduction are the publishers of the standard novels, because that's who published the 1831 edition. The publishers of the standard novels have asked me to write this introduction, and I'm going to do so. So I kind of looked that up. That's one of those rabbit holes you can get on.
Oh, it is.
Internet.
Yeah, the publication history of the book is kind of interesting in and of itself.
Yeah. There's actually more to say about that, right? Because we've talked, generally we talk about the 1818 edition and the 1831 edition, but scholars have 6 or 7 editions.
Right. Yeah, because there was an interim one from 1823 that was sort of halfway between 1818 and 1831 as well.
Yeah, I wouldn't say halfway, because my understanding of it, I also haven't read it, but my understanding of it is William Godwin, Mary's father, made some corrections, which she maintained in the 1831 edition.
Right.
So just if you're keeping score, William Godwin, who was not speaking to Mary when she wrote Frankenstein.
No, not at all.
It's hard to know how much time to devote to talking about Mary's extraordinary life.
Well, I think it'll just kind of come up throughout the book, because so much of what's in the book is her.
Absolutely.
So I think it just sort of comes up organically out of discussing the book. You can't divorce Mary from the novel. So I think it'll just kind of come up. But yeah, Godwin was sort of a radical of his time.
I've heard it said that he invented anarchism.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's...
I think that maybe goes a little far, but
I'm sure he didn't invent anarchy.
No,
but anarchism as a political thought, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe. I know that Percy Shelley was quite enamored of him, and vice versa, up until Percy ran off with his daughter while he was still married. But
it's okay. So the one thing I want to make sure we do say is Mary grew up in a household where her parents were considered, great people of great stature. In the literary and political thought.
The literati of the time. And is it George Bernard Shaw would visit quite often, or is that too?
Samuel Coleridge.
Yeah, I mean,
read her The Rime of the Ancient Mariner when she was a little girl.
And that's referenced in the novel.
Yeah, well, exactly. That's why this will continue to come up. When she grew up in a household where these were friends of her dad. So her mother dies when she was 10, and
10 days.
I'm sorry, when she was 10 days. Sorry,
it's a big difference.
Big difference. No, when she was 10 days old. So yes, she didn't know her mother.
And we should talk about her mother, because she did kind of invent feminism and that whole movement. She was very outspoken in that regard.
and she paid for it.
And she paid a heavy price for it.
When Mary writes Frankenstein, the first one, and when she writes the second one, I think by that point, Mary Wollstonecraft is not considered, basically.
Yeah, basically.
It takes a while. It's sometime after 1831 when she starts to be recognized in that capacity.
Well, yeah, because the patriarchal society is pushing her down, which I think we still see some nut job trying to convince people that she didn't write the book at all.
Well,
So
exactly.
it still continues,
And so this is that
200
background.
Some years later.
Exactly. Yeah. And this is that background I'm talking about, where why would it even be reasonable to think that this girl, as we call her, and she calls herself a girl in the
She does.
could do this is the environment she grew up in. And her father, for all of his failings that will no doubt come up multiple times.
And there are quite a few failings. Yeah.
The one thing everybody seems to agree on is he took great interest in educating his children.
Yes.
Mary's teacher throughout her adolescence was William Godwin. She didn't, I don't even think
she went to public school. No.
Yeah.
I don't believe so.
So this is the background that you have to bring to it if you're going to try to believe that a young girl could write something great.
She would go and read at her mother's gravesite
yes,
all the time and write there as well.
Yeah.
So she grew up in that environment, as did you, didn't you? You say your parents were librarians and you had
that's an
books all the
interesting
time?
point.
I
think
she didn't have Coleridge coming
get
over
in.
to read his work to you.
No,
as far as I know, but
it's funny because I like that version of the story, and so cut this part out. But my dad was a librarian for like a few months, and then he went into construction, so it was a little different. But I like your version of it.
All right.
But yeah, that's an interesting point I hadn't thought about. There was certainly a respect for books in my house as a result, and I think people that have lived with me since think there's an eccentricity to the way I look at books sometimes, because my mom would bring home stacks of books, stuff she thought I might be interested in, and I'd separate it into two piles, keep and take it back, and there was no, and that's Mary. When Mary has Coleridge actually come and read the Rime of the Ancient Mariner to her, it's little surprised that ends up being quoted,
referenced, quite frequently. Actually, it comes up.
Okay, so
I had a different background, although my parents weren't great readers. I don't know if my dad ever read a book all the way through, cover to cover. My mom would on occasion. I know she read Jonathan Livingston Seagull for some bizarre reason, but everybody read it at the time. So, but they were very indulgent.
When is that? 70,
early 70s, early 70s. Yeah. But they were very indulgent of my avarice reading. I mean, you've been to my house.
It's true.
There are books everywhere. I don't think there's a room in the house that doesn't have a stack of books somewhere. So they were always very indulgent of that. But I come to find out that my birth father taught English and had books everywhere in his house as well. So
that's interesting.
And I never met him. I only found out 2-3 years ago who he was.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting nature versus nurture kind of a thing.
And interestingly applicable to Mary Shelley's relationship with her mother, who she obviously never met. Well, doesn't remember ever meeting.
Right.
Huh. That is kind of interesting, isn't it? I guess I'm tempted to think there can't be too much. I guess I just want to believe that's nurture. I don't know. Maybe not.
I mean, they did, like I said, indulge me, but they didn't, actively pursue it either. They let me, if I wanted to buy a book, it wasn't a big deal.
Yeah, right.
Versus wanting to buy a toy, which sometimes had to be argued on the Senate floor. So, And
arguments on the Senate floor, it was kind of a fait accompli before you even got started.
Yeah, basically.
It makes me sort of want to think when you say your dad didn't ever read a book all the way through. My dad actually did read constantly, but he read junk. So he encouraged my love of junk.
Okay. What do you consider junk that your dad would have read?
Westerns.
Oh, well.
And science fiction, which nowadays I guess we look back on it differently.
Yeah.
at the time, it was considered junk. Comic books. My dad read comic books.
Oh, did he really? Oh, nice.
So what would happen is now we're just talking about this, but I mean, we are doing a book podcast.
It's pertinent too. Yeah.
Yeah. We would go to the store, my brothers and I, and get a bunch of comic books, and we'd bring them home, and my dad would get the pile, and he'd go through them.
Oh, really?
We wouldn't really get to read them until he was done with
Until
them.
he was done. Now, was he weeding them out in case it was inappropriate, or he just liked to read them?
I cannot imagine anybody weeding things out because they were inappropriate in my childhood. That would be
all right.
an interesting thing. Like I said, I went and I saw Monty Python's Meaning of Life in the theater when it came out when I was 12 years old with my mom.
Yeah, that's interesting because it would have killed my mom to sit through it.
Anyway,
although she did drive me to see Life of Brian downtown, so I mean, as long
when
as
you
she
say
didn't
that,
have
you
to,
mean when it came out?
Yeah.
Wow.
And I wasn't
Was it-
old enough to see an R-rated film, but they didn't. Nobody checked my ID. Protesters did try to prevent us from getting into the theater.
That's what I was going to ask. There was an actual protest in Minneapolis.
Yep.
When you say downtown, I assume you mean
It was
Minneapolis.
a Skyway. Yeah, Skyway Theater
Okay.
downtown. Yeah.
At the Skyway Theater. The
They're
now
outside. Yeah, it's now the State Theater?
is it? I don't know.
I don't know. Or it's a bunch of bars or something.
I thought maybe it was a strip club actually.
Well,
Or is that next
well,
to
we
it?
could go find out.
I guess.
There we go. We've got our Monty Python reference. We had Doctor Who yet?
I got plenty of Doctor Who stuff. You don't
Okay.
don't tempt me.
I've got Bugs Bunny locked and loaded. So
Okay, good. So the publishers of the standard novels. This book comes out in 1818, written by Anonymous, and
Yep.
a great many people assume it's written by Percy Shelley.
Percy Shelley.
Kind of covered that ground. It wasn't. Um,
yeah, like it or not, folks, that's just
Yeah.
how it is.
yeah. Well, and I got to say, like it in my case.
I
That's one of
like
the
it.
things I like about it is I like reading this book knowing that it's written by an 18-year-old girl. It adds some flavor to it to me.
Oh, I think
for me.
so. I think so.
And I think you said it. Percy Shelley is not regarded anymore.
I've said a number of times, and prove me wrong, but I think he is remembered as the husband of Mary Shelley, who wrote Frankenstein, if
Yeah.
he's remembered at all, unless
Right.
you're a English lit major or something like that who reads his poetry. But I've tried, and I'll pass on that. It's a hard no.
Yeah.
So, and the same thing
And-
with Byron. I would say Lord Byron is the same thing. Although he was a rock star in his time, I would hazard to guess that he is known primarily by his association with Mary Shelley.
And his life story more than his literary accomplishments.
Yeah.
I mean, we're going to talk about that. A lot of this introduction is how all that comes together. So the book comes out, it's anonymous, and it sells pretty well. And by
Originally, it was printed in 3 volumes too.
That's
I
right.
don't know if that's worth mentioning. And
Well,
I've
Thank
seen
you for
them,
mentioning it because
I've
the
seen them go
publishers of
for-
the standard. Oh, you've seen the actual original
I've
copies
seen
go
pictures of them on eBay go for hundreds of thousands of dollars.
for. Yeah, I bet.
I can
Yeah.
buy one for $6 at Barnes and Noble and be just as happy.
And you'd be out $6 because I just downloaded mine. It's in the
Yeah.
public domain.
Oh yeah, it always has been.
Yeah. Well, that's what's
Maybe.
interesting is the publishers of the standard novels published this in 1831. And one of the things apparently they were known for doing was taking books that had only been published in multiple volumes and putting them in a
Putting
single
them in one-
volume.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird that that's what happened here.
Yeah.
But also they existed from about 1818, maybe 1819 through 1832, I want to say. So this is at the end
Very
of
tail end.
their
of
existence. They completely collapsed and it became a great big drama. And this is what I mean by the internet rabbit hole. Is I'm
Yeah.
trying to study this introduction of this book, and I'm reading about the guy who published it because his life story is kind of interesting.
Well, that was there's a line in the opening prologue to Bride of Frankenstein where Byron says Murray has refused to publish it, and I thought he was talking about a guy named Murray till I looked into it. It was a publishing house. Murray was a family.
Okay.
It was Bill, Brian, Joel,
I got to give
Anyway.
myself credit that I even picked up on it as fast as I did.
Yeah, that laid
That
better
is the
than
kind of one that
Invisible
would
Ray.
just blow past.
That was
Yeah,
better than
not like the Invisible Ray.
20 minutes later.
Good old Ray.
But they actually published a lot of weird stuff. I think they originally published Jekyll and Hyde.
Yeah.
But they passed on Frankenstein initially.
Interesting. I know
Fuck 'em.
that in my reading on this, the publishers of the standard, is that what it's called? The standard novels.
Standard novels.
Yeah. I can't remember if they did this, but it came out, it was mentioned in there that Jane Austen's work came out anonymously
Yeah.
when she wrote it. So it was a common practice for women in this era to just put out a book written by anonymous,
Written by anonymous, yeah.
rather than even bother to come up with a pseudonym.
Well, yeah, and I was just reading, gosh, what was I just reading? But yeah, a book was written by a woman who used a male pseudonym.
Yeah.
Nom de plume. That was fairly common too.
Right. And I wonder if it became more common after they saw what happened to Mary, right? That everybody
Right.
thought Percy wrote it.
Yeah.
So this one comes out, and apparently this is part of the rabbit hole problem, as I was trying to figure out exactly what happened. But apparently this book being published in 1831 resulted in a copyright issue that meant that the book wasn't available in England for another 30 years because of that.
Oh yeah.
Some kind of
yeah,
copyright
that's
issue.
Right. Yeah, I remember reading that too.
So I don't know if this was even a good deal for Mary.
Probably not. I don't think she ever made a whole lot of money off of it. No.
Yeah, I don't think so
I
either.
think she made more off of like her travel books. And she wrote a science fiction novel that really ought to track down and read.
I know this in Percy. I'm just going to call him Percy Jr. I can't remember his name, but there is a Percy.
There's a Percy Jr.
Percy Jr. And he did inherit the fortune of the Shelleys.
Mhm.
So there was some. Percy Shelley came from money, and Mary
yeah.
did eventually get that money.
Oh, right,
essentially.
right. Yeah,
So
I'm not saying she died
but it took a
penniless.
long time. She was, you know.
She didn't die penniless like Florence Stoker, Bram Stoker's widow, did.
Yeah.
You know,
She was buried with a copy of Nosferatu, clutching it to
yeah,
her bosom.
the final, yeah, it was the actual negative was buried with her.
Clutching it to her bosom like that
Yeah,
scene in
yeah.
Young Frankenstein.
Yeah.
So that's that.
And then Werner Herzog dug it up. So
Yeah, apparently. God, I haven't seen that in a long time. So my notes are a little just sort of, I just kind of grabbed some phrases from
Sure,
throughout
go
this
ahead.
introduction. The next one that did strike me, we kind of covered. She refers to herself as the daughter of two persons of distinguished literary celebrity,
yeah.
which is an interesting phrase. Like, I'm going to say that probably a lot because I'm not very, I don't have a very good vocabulary. But it's a very interesting phrase.
Which you just proved.
Yeah.
Right there.
She's daughter of two persons of distinguished literary celebrity.
Yeah.
And when she was writing those words, neither one of her
Neither of
parents
them were
were held
celebrities
in
anymore.
high esteem. Yeah.
No.
But as we say, no doubt,
Well,
the source of some of this.
I think, you know, it goes again to they're known because she's known. I
Yeah.
don't think William Godwin or Mary Wollstonecraft would be remembered like they are had it not been for Frankenstein.
I hear you, and I don't have an argument against it. I just don't know.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are historians that are passionate about each of these people that would stand up and argue with you. But
Well, I'm sure there are people that would say, yeah, Percy was by far the better artist and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, okay, fine.
I think there are less Percy
But you
defenders on this
go,
front, but yeah.
you go to Target and find a Percy Shelley thing. I defy you.
Yeah, that's true.